Hello my gorgeous plant people, welcome back to Reading Mindfully. My name is Yana and today we are fixing up the last bit of my plant collection. So let's just get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today, like I said, we're fixing up the last bit of my plants. I have 4 plants that I want to fix here today, and most of them are my crawling plants. And the first plant, one plant is not a crawler. It's actually my philodendron Gloriosum, but as you can see, it just has a lot of crispy bits. And this plant, man, we have been through it. If there was ever a plant that just made me go, whoo, child, it is this plant. And I think what I'm struggling with this plant is the fact that I don't water it enough, because I noticed that it gets attacked by spider mites pretty frequently. And I think this plant, because of how velvety it is and how furry the petioles are, I think it needs a little bit more moisture than other philodendrons. And so that's why I think I go wrong with this plant. Also, I think this plant could do well with a little bit less light. And so I'm going to experiment with this plant to see what I can do with it, but I'm pretty sure the leaves could be a tad darker. I'm going to put in a picture of a philodendron just so for comparison, but I think I could, move it back from the lighting just a little bit so that I can get a little bit of darker leaves and then maintain more moisture, because I think that's where I'm going wrong with this plant. But for now, I'm just going to cut off, the crispy leaves and get it tidied up. Some of these leaves are even falling off. They're like so far gone. But I'm also going to take off these dried husk pieces so that way I can see any future pests. But yeah, me and this plant, it's like some of the velvety plants are a little bit tricky sometimes, at least for me, but one day I will get them down. I'm so glad that I'm getting these plants fixed up. Like I said, these are the last couple plants that just don't look good in my collection, and it is making me feel so much better about the status of my collection. Now this leaf is pretty dried out, which is sad because it is a newer leaf. And even when I just unfurled it, it's not looking good. So I'm debating if I want to leave it on or not. I might just leave the leaf on there until I can grow out a couple more. And then I probably will eventually cut it off, but it is putting out a leaf there. It's got a growth tip there and a growth tip there, and so it's gonna fill out. I just have to be patient and watch it more closely. I did just give it a watering, so that's good as well. But yeah, that's what this plant looks like now, and hopefully this time around I'll be able to keep up the moisture. The next plant that I want to do is they're both so bad. Well, this one's not as bad. It's actually coming around. This is my philodendron Gloriosum. And this plant I kind of have struggled with from the beginning, but I was able to turn this plant around, and I actually started it over from the stub, and I'll try to get some close-ups, but I actually cut the stem in different pieces and put them in different ways in the pot, so that way I could try to get as much new growth as possible. And as you can see, I have the main stem here, I have one piece here, and then this piece growing on this side. So I put them in different directions to try to get the plant to be more full when it did grow back in. I had another piece of stem, but that one didn't take, so I'm gonna put that to the side. And then I have this stick because it was balancing the plant when it was rooting in the pot. But since it's now rooted, I don't need that stick anymore. And I think what I'm actually going to do with this plant is just to take off any bits. And actually, I think I actually want to refresh the soil because this one has a lot of perlite in it and the soil is quite dry. So I think I want to go ahead and refresh this soil just so this plant isn't like looking so dry all the time. So I'm just going to carefully try to dump the soil out, and it is super dry. Like I did in the last video, I'm just going to run my fingers around the outside so that way I try not to damage the plant. I'm going to gently poke the bottom to push the plant outwards. And pop it right on out. Yeah, so like I suspected, this soil is quite dry. I believe this is the soil. This is the soil mixture that I used to do in the beginning where I was kind of perlite heavy. And so I don't make it so perlite heavy anymore. I do like a 60-40 split, and back then I think I was doing like a 50-50 of soil and perlite, or even 60 perlite and 40 soil, and that's really just, it's not necessary to make it that dry. But that was when I was trying to get rid of fungus gnats. I was trying to make my soils drier. And I mean, it worked as far as fungus gnats. I don't have a fungus gnat issue, but sometimes it could be too dry for the plants. So I also want to make sure that I'm checking the roots while I'm here. And I am seeing some dry roots, which means that the water was not reaching the roots. And I can show you what the dry roots look like. So this plant definitely needs more moisture, that's for sure. All right. So you can see that this main section has these chunkier white roots, which is what you want to see for the plant. See here, you can see more chunky white roots. And now this section that's not really growing, it has this little sprout. It has all this dry, crusty roots. And so those are roots that were starved of water. And so that's why they have dried out and they look so stringy. So I'm just gonna cut these off because they're not beneficial to the plant anymore. And so that's why it's important to make sure that all of the water is reaching your roots, because you can dry out your roots and then you'll wonder why your plant is not growing or why your plant is dying. And this can happen to half of your plant like it is doing to mine. So that's why you just want to make sure that your soil mixture is good, your roots are good. I've actually had this happen to a couple of my plants, especially some Syndapsis that I purchased, where half of the plants are rooted and the other half aren't. And so you'll have a plant that's like doing well on one side and dying on the other. And so sometimes when you have that happening, it's best to look at the roots and make sure everything is, you know, checking out. And so now when I go to repot this plant, I want to make sure that I put enough soil in the pot, but also I want to make sure that I'm not burying the stems, because these are crawling plants. You don't want to bury the stem, you want them to be right on top of the soil, so flush with the soil line, and so that way you don't rot the roots or rot the stem. So I'm going to put enough soil in here so that this extra chunk will grow roots. And I think I'm just going to lay it, situate it in there, making sure not to bury the stem. Then I want to carefully fill it. So that way the stem is not buried. But I want to have enough soil around it so that it also supports the plant and the stem doesn't fall over as well. So sometimes these crawling plants can be quite tricky to pot, but I just make sure that I get pots that are wide. You want to get wide pots for these crawling plants, so that way you can go ahead and have enough room for them to crawl across the soil. Either that, or you can buy those like more narrow pots, so that way they can grow in a straight line if you want them to. But I noticed that after a while the plant has nowhere to go unless you train it to, you know, go up or down, or, you know, anything like that. So what I like to do, or what I started doing, is just cutting the stems and then putting them in different directions. That way I can try to get a fuller plant. And so now that it's potted, what I'm going to do for the longest stem here, I'm going to cut in between the nodes, so that way I could try to get another growth point. And now that I've cut that one, I am going to need to put that stick back in there just to hold up the plant. Where did I put that stick? Oh, here it is. Just so I can have this held up while the plant gets rooted. And I am going to go ahead and water this one in just to make sure it's nice and has enough moisture. But yeah, this is the philodendron Gloriosum. So you can see this is the main stem here, and then I cut this piece here and I just left it there so that way it could root. This was the piece that had the dying roots, and so hopefully now it'll be able to start over and grow new roots. And then this is the little baby that grew off of the other stem that I cut. So that's my first crawling plant. My next one is my philodendron Plaumonia, which looks so bad, so bad. It has so many dried up bits, and I think this one is the same. It wasn't receiving enough moisture, and so I'm gonna just first cut off or take off all the dead leaves. And I know this stem is still alive because I do have some green in here, and so the plant is still alive. I have not lost hope that I won't be able to save it. And I'm just going to take off these husky bits. Alright, so now I can see what I'm working with here. And I also want to change the soil on this plant and check on the roots just to make sure everything is okay. Like I said about the other one, I think I just put too much perlite in this plant. This was, again, one of my older mixtures. And so I just want to make sure that I look at the roots just to see that it, you know, the plant's doing well. That's why you always have to just, when you have plants, it's all about just, you know, trial and error most of the time. You can always look at people's videos and do research and things, but at the end of the day, it is a lot of, you know, just trying things for yourself and seeing what works for you and your plants. And so this is what the roots look like. They're not terrible, but they are a little dry. And so when I repot this plant, I am going to definitely give it a good drink. And I mix it in with my other soil batch, and so my other soil batch has a little bit less perlite, and so in mixing the two, it'll be okay. It won't have as much perlite in there. So I'm just going to make it so that it sits right on top of the soil level. And actually what I think I'm going to do with this plant is cut up these pieces, because as you can see, one piece is growing. I have a couple pieces that are growing in the air, and you know, this is a crawling, the philodendron Plaumonia is a crawling plant. So I think I'm going to cut these pieces and sit them on top of the soil, so that way I can see if I can grow some new ones. And I think I'm also going to cut up this long piece as well, just cutting in between the nodes. And if you can see, the node is this rigid part, this bumpy part, and even with crawlers you'll even see where roots would grow. So you can see the roots would grow here, here, and here. And so I'm going to cut in between these areas and then just sit them on top of the soil and try to get them to root. So if I do this, I'll have a ton of Plaumonia pieces, and you know, hopefully some of them should take. I'm just gonna cut in between here and here. And then I'm gonna cut this piece here. Alright, so now that's all I'm left with is the stump. I'm gonna go ahead and put in some soil to cover the roots from the original plant. And then what am I going to do is I'm going to take these little chunky pieces, and where the roots are developing, I'm going to put those into the soil. I'm not going to bury them into the soil, but I'm going to put them down far enough for them to get some moisture when I water the plant. Remember, you don't want to bury these. I'm simply just going to kind of push them into the soil a little bit, so that way I can grow some babies. And this is what I did to my Gloriosum. And when I did it to my Gloriosum, I had never done it before. I was just kind of testing it to see if I could do it, and so when it worked, I was like, ooh. I'm going to lay these into the soil. And I'm just going to configure them every which direction to try to get as many different directions as I can to make the pot more full when they do grow back in. And then this is the main one here. So this one I might have to kind of hold this up with a piece of, with a stick or something, just to hold that one up so it can grow roots. I also put this in water before and it was able to grow roots as well, just through water propagation. But I might lean it to the side just so it can grow roots, but yeah. And so this is what my Plaumonia looks like. You can see that I just laid the stem cuttings on top of the soil in different directions, and so that's what I'm going to do. And like I said, I'm just going to water them and get them going. And the last one is my big baby, my philodendron Mcdowell. Oh, this one's heavy. As you can see, this one has gone by the wayside. You can see the leaves. They're not good. This pot plant actually, I don't think it needs to be repotted. And so I'm not gonna repot it. What I'm gonna do is just I'm gonna cut off these leaves. I feel so good for just like getting this done. These have been looking so bad. And some of you guys are probably like, what happened? How'd you let your plant get that bad? Sometimes things just happen, guys. But the great thing about plants is that most of the time you can get them to come back, so. Alright, so I've taken off the older leaves, taken off these husky pieces. And so now I can see the nodes better. I don't think I'm going to change the soil on this one. This one actually could use a bigger pot, but since the roots aren't coming out, and you know, I think I'm just going to cut up the nodes like I did, cut up the stem like I did on the other ones. So that way I won't have one long stem, as you can see. I'm gonna cut this up so that way I can have potential more, more philodendron Mcdowell pieces, and hopefully I can get a much fuller plant. Now yes, this plant was full when it's growing in a straight line, but I wanted to have the plant grow in different directions, and so I can have a more full plant and they're just not on one side, because that's what was happening to this plant. I had this one long stem, and so all the leaves were coming on one side, and I had to put the stick in there to balance it up because it was so top heavy. So by having multiple stems, I'm hoping to balance the plant out better, so I won't have to have a stick to hold it up, and hopefully give the plant more stability. So I want to have like one stem here, one stem there, one stem there. Like, you guys get the idea, kind of having like make it look like a clock, if that helps. And so I'm just going to use you guys see this little knife. I don't have like a big shear. Like this one's not even as, it's not really big enough for the plant stem, and you're like, what are you gonna do with this baby knife? But this is all I have for my plants. I don't have a designated knife, and I'm not using my good kitchen knives, if y'all know what I mean. So let's just go in here and chop up some stems. Let's see. This has a lot of stems, so I think I'm gonna cut it here. Alright, and so this plant, it actually has rooted pretty much all the way down, and so that also helps a lot when your plants stems have rooted, because that gives you a better probability of it propagating correctly. And so I'm just going to maneuver it around in the pot so it can face the other way. But I have to be careful since it's rooted. I don't want to snap the roots. Alright, so that one's there. And then you see I have this chunk here. And so this piece of the chunk right here is rooted, so I have to be careful. And let's see if I can take off this thing here. Alright, so I think I'm going to, the roots will grow there, so I think I want to cut it like here. Or maybe here. Guys, I've been waiting to do this like, I've been waiting to do this for like a whole year. Even before my plant started going downhill, I wanted to chop it up because I was having that long stem was just really not working for me anymore, like I said. And so I've been waiting to do this, and I wanted to show you guys how I do it on camera. I'm just cutting off the stump of that leaf, but I've been waiting to do this on camera so that way I can show you guys what I'm doing. And so I think I'm just gonna cut here. So you see the root would grow here at this brown section. That's where the roots grow. You also get roots growing here, but I think I'm gonna cut here in this dead space, because then you can see this next juncture, that's where roots will grow as well. But I'm trying to give myself enough pieces and a greater probability of having it propagating, you know, well. All right, so we're gonna lay this piece. I'm actually gonna take the stick out. And then I'm gonna lay this piece down in here. I kind of have to fill that in a little bit because that's where that stick was, and there's a big hole there now. So I'm going to lay that down in there, and then I could always have this piece here, lay that down in there. And then I'm going to have to find a way for it to stay up. But you guys get the idea of what I'm doing here. And like I said, this one's going to be a lot easier because since a lot of the stem is already rooted, it'll just grow. It won't have to reestablish itself like the other two, where those will have to start, you know, from scratch because they didn't have roots. But yeah, so that's what that will be like. And so I'm gonna show you guys what I did here. And so you see one stem is here, one stem cutting. I have two here because I couldn't really move it unless I up potted the plant, and I didn't really want to do that right now. So I have one piece here, one piece here, one piece here. You see this long piece? I have the main one here that is attached to all of the roots. And then I have the top, sorry. I have the last cutting here that has this piece there. And so like I said, I'm just gonna water this in, and then I'm definitely gonna give you guys an update on these plants just so you can see how they progress. But yeah, like I feel so much better now that this is done. And I can't wait to see what it's gonna look like, how it's gonna turn out. Ugh, I just wanted to get this done, and now I'm so happy that I did. And hopefully my plants do well from here. But guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this transformation series. You don't know how much this means to me to have you guys like go along on the journey of me fixing up my plants. And like I said before, if I had done all of this in one go, it would have been so overwhelming for me to get done. And I just would have been feeling like I had so much to do. But by breaking it up, you know, doing one video treatments, one taking off yellow leaves, staking up plants, pruning back plants, it made it so much easier for me to just fix up my collection. And it even made it fun, and it was nice for you guys to join me in case you guys had to do the same thing. Like we could kind of do it together and fix up our collections together. So I just want to thank you guys for watching this series so much. It has helped my anxiety. It's made me feel so much better about my plants. I've even fallen in love back with, you know, with some plants in my collection. So I just want to thank you guys. But as always, I just want to thank you so much for watching my videos, liking and subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.